Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week comes from Pulsar. It's the Pulsar Poseidon. This is a new release by Pulsar. They always make great stuff. This is no exception. This is an emulation of the Trident A-Range EQ. They've added a whole bunch of extra bells and whistles, including a full spectrum analysis, which is really amazing just on one level because you get to see a lot of things that people always talk about with the Trident EQ, if you've looked into it at all, which is band interaction. And what this means is that because, for example, the two mid bands share the same electronics in the circuit for their EQ adjustments, they actually affect each other. And just by shifting the frequency of one, you can change the shape of the bell curve of the other. Which is actually creates some interesting effects. Now, I have worked on a Trident A-Range console. I will say my experience is limited. It was one tracking session, and I thought it sounded freaking amazing. I was really blown away by it. Part of the reason is there's not a lot of them out there. There were only 13 of them that were ever made. The history goes back to Trident Studios back in the early 70s, 1971. They were actually looking to put a Neve console in there, but the control room for it was too small. So they decided to build a custom console, and they kind of did it all by ear. Malcolm Toft was the studio manager at the time, and I think one of the primary designers, and all of the other engineers who were staff helped kind of help them put that together. And the result was actually something really unique and amazing. Lots of classic records that were tracked there, David Bowie and many others. So let's dive right into it, though. We got the normal toolbar stuff. There's a few things up here of note. One is it tells you when there's an update available, so hopefully nothing will crash in this demoing. Oversampling, you could make it stepped gains. Now, there were no stepped gains on the original. It was actually a slider. There were little faders on it, but the frequencies were stepped. So you can actually kind of put that in and make it just like the original, or you could operate it just sort of free form, which is the way I have it set up here. In the other example tracks, I have it mostly set up on the stepped gains, and I'll explain a little bit about that. There's also a step for the high pass, low pass filter, and then, balloons and all the other sort of stuff that you would expect. There's a little thing here if you don't like seeing the frequency analysis, but if you do, then you have a couple of viewing options there, so you can just sort of see what's going on. It also gives the ability to sort of process graphically, right? So I could kind of pull this out, and like if you could see here, just for quick example, if I take band 2, you could see how that changes the shape of band 3, right? Without any gain, which is just sort of this crazy thing. Almost creates like an offset kind of bell curve, which is sort of interesting. So, and the to a lesser degree, the low frequency shelf and high frequency shelf also have some band interaction in them. But you can operate in two ways. You can operate just by clicking and kind of moving it around graphically if you prefer to do that, or actually work with the sliders and the frequencies here and work with it that way. So you got the graphic mode. You can set the scale over here. Otherwise, it will automatically set it up. You got meters, all of that sort of thing. In terms of the primary setup, we'll come back to this. This is like a saturation section, and just start with the main EQ. On the main EQ, you have a high pass filter and a low pass filter. It has an off position. Now, on the original, it had 3 switches, and the 3 switches were 25, 50, and 100. But if you hit different combinations of the switches, you could get it up to 200. So there was sort of a math involved by hitting multiple switches that would give you different frequencies, and that was the same on the low pass filter. Same basic concept that would get you down to 4K, up as high as 15K, and here all the way up to 200 hertz. The frequency bands, just so you understand, like the low frequency shelf is here, right? So you got it, again, sliding here. The high frequency shelf is up here on the other end. I believe on the actual EQ, it's in the opposite. It's mirror image to that, if my memory serves, but I could be wrong about that. And then you have your frequencies here from like 3.6K up to 6K. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Yeah. From 1.5 up to 26K, right? So you've got a pretty broad range there of frequencies. You can also, if you have a stereo, you could turn individual bands on or off. you got operated for mid, side, or both, right? So have them both together, right? So it can operate in that way if you want to operate it that way, where you just want to apply EQ just to the sides or just to the mid signal. You have your high mid parametric, fixed parametric, and low mid fixed parametric. It's a fixed bell curve, so there's no way to adjust that, and they didn't adapt or change anything because a lot of the unique sound is sort of built into what that bell shape is, and it's fairly broad when you just sort of look at it. That's covering a pretty broad range of frequencies for a boost. So it kind of lends a little bit more into the tonal shaping rather than to sort of sharp, sort of surgical type of EQ. If that's what you're looking for, this is not your animal. So those are your bands there, booster attenuation with the sliders. Now there's a saturation section. You have a drive control. Now the drive control operates in two basic places. You could feed it through the original electronics, which is the Trident symbol right here. So this is the Trident setup as they had it. And then Pulsar designed their own form of saturation, which is a little pulsar signal here. So you could choose between those two. So when you actually drive the input signal in, you could saturate it with a couple of colorations or take it off. So this would be going through the input transformer emulation and the other electronics that are happening. Now, on the actual EQ design itself, there's no output transformer, but they've added one in here for extra measure, just to give you an extra coloration option. And this is also affected by the drive control. So as you push through, Pulsar on the number 2 created a custom transformer, and the number 1 is the Marinair transformer, which is most famously known for being the transformer in the 1073 Neve EQ. Or you could shut that off. So then that adds like a nice other coloration. There's an auto gain. This is really cool. Essentially, it's not working in real time. Like it's not actively kind of making adjustments in real time, based on level. But if you make EQ adjustments plus minus, it will compensate gain accordingly, right? So, and it's pretty good. These things are always very difficult to make because when you change the EQ of anything, the perception of it, because we don't hear equally at all frequencies, can be skewed. So some of that plays in. There's also a scale here. So like, for example, if I just sort of build in some boosts and things like that, I can sort of decrease the overall scale of it. So because sometimes to get certain sounds or to get like a certain shape, you can really push into the EQ with more extreme settings. And if you do so, then you could sort of scale it back a little bit while kind of preserving the shape. So in a way, it adds like a whole other dimension. It's not exactly the same as because the shapes will kind of affect each other more as you sort of sweep through them. So this is kind of a nice little addition as well to give you some options. Then there's an output gain control. If you have the auto gain, you may not need that much. This is just your pure bypass. And the rest we just kind of go with. So let's kind of dig into some of the basics of it here. I have a song here. Let's just kind of A/B with the plugins in and out, and then we'll kind of go through some of the settings manually. As our ancestors, I'll tell you what. If I was smart, I would have had this all queued up right to the beginning. Let's just do that. I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space. They got experts on the TV and the radio, presenting the facts for one side of the case. All right, so just to kind of give you like a basic idea, so that's just kind of with it in. Now, what I did for most of it is I put saturation or a little bit of drive. I selected some different transformers, just kind of what I felt would shape out well. And, obviously I'll kind of go through just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what the capabilities of this are. So let's see, I can do a little A/B comparison here. Let's sort of play around with this a little bit just with the vocal soloed out.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning.
Right, so you get like a nice air frequency thing on it. So that's 15 dB of boost, pushing it down into 12K. So you get like a really clean sound there. One of the things I wasn't clear about, the low shelf, which seems to have a little bit of a kind of Baxendal-ish kind of shape, I guess, to it. Maybe not. Maybe it's a little less so than that. But it covers a pretty broad range. Like if I were to just sort of zero out the EQ, let's just kind of start here. If I were to take and kind of do a boost, you could see that if this is set to 45 hertz, it's still affecting frequencies almost up to 1K, right? So it has like a pretty broad shape, and which is very much what a Baxendal filter does. And it may be, this is apparently are inductor designs for the high shelf and the low shelf. So you have like a passive circuit. And I've seen documentation that says it's all passive. I've seen documentation that says the midbands are active. I'm not exactly clear on that. But you hear that it has like a very kind of transparent kind of sound. So let me go back to where I was here. And let's see.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived.
So I can kind of soften the mids there a little bit.
They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space.
Get like see now here with the boost on the low end, if I just take this off here, you can kind of see a little bit more of what the low frequency filter is doing. I also have this 100 hertz boost here. Let me just kind of take that off for a second.
I see the
so let's just, if I use the boost here on the low end,
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe.
I can sort of tilt up the lower end of the voice.
These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now,
and then I can kind of shape it a little bit here,
sending civilians into space.
All with the auto gain.
They got experts on the TV and the radio presenting the facts for one side of the case.
So I can create like a warmer, more airy kind of sound. You can hear how musical it sounds, right? Just really, open and transparent sounding. Now I also have the drive on here. Let's just sort of go through some of the different settings here a little bit on that.
I see the headlines in the morning.
So this is the Trident electronics.
And I don't know what to believe.
And the Pulsar.
These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now.
This has, I'm not sure exactly what it is. This has a little bit more of a tubey kind of nature to it, to my ear. A little bit smoother, Maybe that's a little bit better for more of a hi-fi. This has an edgier, sort of solid state distortion kind of sound. I have no idea what it is, but that's their own custom circuit, so that would make sense. Let's hear what the transformers sound like.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived.
Again, this has like a cleaner, more open sound. So if I pair these up, the Pulsar ones,
I see the headlines in the morning,
Maybe back off a little bit on this because of the transformer.
and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived.
Gives like some nice tonal shaping options. Plus, I love the fact that the drive has a good range to it where you're not. I hate that when you kind of move it up to like just a small amount and you're already into heavy saturation. Give me like a good range, and if I want to trash it, make that up on the upper range of it. So, really amazing, right? Just a lot of air. The auto gain works really well. And then I think you can kind of shape, all kinds of sounds. Like let's kind of play around a little bit with the piano here. Here, why don't we take this, zero it out here for a second, and maybe start with just focusing on some transformer stuff. Maybe that gives it a little bit more of a rock kind of thing. So this is with that kind of Neve transformer, that Marinair transformer. Let's see if I can shape the low end a little bit, bring out a little bit more body into this. And maybe start with some air frequency. You can see how this affects the width of that, right? Which is pretty crazy, because if I do it that way, I'm going to have to move this back a bit. You can see how they sort of seesaw each other here, right? Maybe I'll find like a nice little presence frequency in there, Maybe dip away a little bit of the boxiness there, somewhere around 500. Again, like very musical, giving you like a lot of options. You could just hear how different that is from the previous one. The previous EQ that I'd come up with. And I'm sure it's all going to be a big mess now if I kind of play around with it. Another one might just be the bass. So let's drive this a little bit with a little grit and a little bit of Neve warmth. Here, I can use this to shape that. and then use this one to shape that, or just kind of pull it back in here. But gives you a pretty broad range of controls, and use it on a full mix. This kind of pick any sound, and just has a very transparent musical type of sound. You can understand how this could be used to like shape a record, right? To just kind of mix and kind of really dig into everything, and just having those tonal shaping options adds like a nice flavor to everything as well. Really cool emulation. Pulsar always does great stuff. I better download my update soon. And Poseidon is no different. Trident A range EQ, really cool one. So check it out if you haven't already. And I think it's at least at minimum worth a demo. See if it's a sound that you dig, and if you do, pick it up. It's a really cool one. Plugin of the week from Pulsar. It's the Pulsar Poseidon.